Hello everyone and welcome to a new video. We're back on OM605 content. It doesn't stop. Today I would like to show you a problem I have with this engine and hopefully also the solution. As you might know, I exchanged the engine on this car because with the last one I had a damage on the rear piston. The area between the piston rings got a crack and broke off. So I had low compression on the rear cylinder and I exchanged this engine for this one you see here, which was one I bought from the junkyard 1.5 years ago. And I noticed the problem already when installing this engine and at the first startup, but I knew that this could happen and also that there is a solution for that. So I still finished the assembly of this engine in the car and was driving around now for 500 kilometers. And the engine itself is working fine, but I got a problem at the startup. When starting the engine is only running on 4 cylinders and you can hear that there's no compression on one cylinder. And after the engine gets warm a little, this changes and all cylinders run perfectly fine. So at the operating temperature, this engine doesn't seem to have any issue. It's running great, it's idling great, but only at startup. And it's not due to glow plugs because I exchanged them all. And I also noticed that the intake valve on one cylinder is not closing correctly when the engine is cold. And that's what I already experienced on other engines. So my plan is now to find out which valve doesn't close correctly. I need to wait until the engine is cold because at the moment I was driving here, so there's still temperature approximately 45 degrees and I will need to have to wait. I will start disassembling the intake manifold and all stuff around, and hopefully the engine is cooled down enough so I can start the engine without the intake manifold and exactly see which valve doesn't close correctly. It has been 3 hours now. I was busy with other stuff to give the engine time to cool down. And I hope it's enough now. It's around 25 degrees Celsius. And I will start the engine now and then we will see if we can detect the open valves. So as you saw, it was difficult to see. It was actually not possible to see. I could just hear, and I tested a little more and it is actually the last one. But the engine, maybe it wasn't cold enough. But funny is, the cars I had this problem already. Those weren't my cars, but from a friend I repaired the same symptoms. And it was also the last valve. It was an OM606 at that time. And yeah, it's also the thermically most stressed part. So we will disassemble now the valve cover, the hydraulic lifters, camshafts, stuff like this. And then have a closer look on the last one. Camshafts are out. And the view is open onto the hydraulic lifters. And I already checked them closely and found some of them which I definitely will exchange. I hope it's possible to see. But for example, this one, you see it stopped rotating. Normally the hydraulic lifters shall rotate while the camshaft is working on top of them. so the wear will be consistently throughout the whole surface. And this first one, for example, seemed to have been stuck and didn't rotate, and therefore there's already a groove where the camshaft was rotating. And others show similar symptoms, but this is nothing which will cause an engine damage or something like this. This is just while we have it open, I want to exchange them. The rear one, the one which I think will hold the valve open, doesn't show any significant wear or something, but we will also check it from below. I will take them out and then I will squeeze it in the vise to see if the travel is still the same or if we can see some difference there. And then I have a whole bunch of hydraulic lifters waiting in the shelf. And I thought it's a good opportunity to talk about this problem and also to find a nice solution for that. The problem we are talking about, as you might already see, is about hydraulic lifters, but those aren't actually the real problem. The problem is the age of these engines. So these engines have been around for 20 up to 30 years now, and a lot of them have also a lot of kilometers on them. And what I noticed and also validated on more than just one engine is that during the time of use, the valves get some elongation. So as you can imagine, after 30 years of use, the valve going up and down, ramming into the valve seat, they can get a little bit longer. And also the seat area of the valve will get forged into the head. And that's what leads to a movement of this point in the cylinder head upwards. And normally, during a normal lifetime of 20 years and the normal type of use, this won't be a problem because the hydraulic lifter can compensate for this. So what I measured and found out that when you have a freshly assembled engine and everything is assembled to spec, that the hydraulic lifter still has 1 millimeter way upwards to compensate for changes in the distances. And the rest of the way, which is approximately 2 millimeters, the hydraulic lifter can compensate downwards. And this is due to the different heat exchange rates of the aluminium and the steel parts. First, at engine startup, the aluminium of the cylinder head will get warm, and therefore the distance between the valve seat and the camshaft will increase, and that's what the hydraulic lifter needs to compensate. So this is the start situation. We have the valve in the head and the hydraulic lifter on top, being possible to move 1 millimeter upwards, 2 millimeter downwards when changes occur. And as you can imagine, over the time of use, as I just said, the valve seat will be forged into the head and the valve elongates. This gets even worse when the engine is used in hot climate. So, for example, the engine I got from the junkyard was from Portugal. There are much higher temperatures than here in Germany. And also when the engine is operated with a high temperature thermostat, so is always operated around 100 degrees, and then, for example, is used hardly day to day, then it can happen that the elongation of the valve and the forging into the valve seat will exceed this 1 millimeter, around 1 millimeter. It's not perfectly exact, but it is around 1 millimeter. And then it happens that the valve could stay slightly open, and this often leads to a hard startup. You usually find, if you disassemble these engines, you will find that the original hydraulic lifters have these imprints. So the valve over time has left an imprint on the hydraulic lifter, and this imprint gets deeper, the more you move to the back of the engine. So the last valve on the 6th cylinder, for example, on an OM606 will have the deepest imprint, and this is because the last cylinder will get the most heat because of the inefficiency of the cooling system. And what I also noticed is that engines which are operated in cold climate, like the one I disassembled from my car recently, this one actually had no imprints at all. So all the hydraulics lifters looked like this or even better. And this was after 220,000 kilometers of use and also hard use. So I think the temperature, the operating temperature, has a big impact on how these elements behave and how the elongation progresses. Also, my theory is that these imprints, as deep as you see them here, they only occur as soon as the hydraulic lifter is on block, so is actually completely compressed. And therefore, when the valves are not closing perfectly, the pulses of the combustion will be directed onto this point, and therefore over time it will get this imprint, but this will also compensate for the elongation of the valve, and therefore these engines will operate a long time even when the hydraulic lifters are completely compressed, and you might not notice that this is the case. But in my case, the last valve, and I think also the second one on the 4th cylinder, is not closing perfectly when the engine is cold. After operating 2 minutes and the cylinder head gets some temperature, you hear that they are closing, and then the engine is running perfectly. And this is not because of the glow plugs, which many of you might think when you have these symptoms. I tested it, and it definitely is that the valves stay a little bit open. And I also exchanged the hydraulic lifters already. When I put in the better ones from my engine I disassembled from the car, it was actually worse. Even after letting it rest for some time, starting again, let it run, it even got worse and didn't change. So this proves actually my theory that the hydraulic lifters are already on the end of their compensation possibility. And in this process of changing the hydraulic lifters, I also measured from the axis of the camshaft on top of a fully compressed hydraulic lifter. And the measurement also showed that the hydraulic lifter is completely compressed. And long story short, that's why I'm looking for a new hydraulic lifter. I have some different brands here from different cars. The outer diameters are all the same, so they will fit into the OM605. But of course, I don't know what is the range, how can they adjust, and what are the other parameters will they fit to the OM605, OM606 engines. And my goal is to find out what parameters they have, and to find a hydraulic lifter which has a little bit more compression range to compensate for this problem. And that's what I want to do with this list here. You see, I have 8 different hydraulic lifters from different companies and from different models, and I have 3 originals. I have a lot of old original ones laying around. I just took 3 from the trash box, and I will measure them first and then compare the parameters with the others. I just did the first measurement, so the thickness when the hydraulic lifter is completely extended. And here you see on the old ones, this is what I've already measured a lot of times, so 20.8, around that value. And this is the one which I thought was already completely compressed. And there you see that the material got compressed already a little, and it already misses like 0.3 of a millimeter. Then we have a similar value on this one, and they are very much different. So 19, 19.8, 7, 19.4, 19.6, 18.7, and I think this one could be a good candidate, but it also depends on the groove height. So if it doesn't get any oil, it doesn't make sense. But of course we need to check the compressed thickness, and that's what I will do next. So I'm in between measuring. I already put these three into the vise and marked the position. So you can see here is the original one, and the second one is already compressing more. So I just wrote down it's almost a quarter rotation more, and this will help me decide which one to take. So I think a quarter rotation is around 1 millimeter. So this one is pretty good. It started at a similar height and has even more compression possibility. So this one could be a good candidate. After measuring the compression, they are all almost minus a quarter rotation. There were some difference in between those, but it is because of my high tech measurement tool that it's not so easy to say, but some of them were like this, the others like this, but it always was something like a quarter rotation less. So from the compression height, they all would be nice. So now the last step is to find out the height of the groove, so to make sure it gets oil. And then I will also test fit them, or the last candidates, into the camshaft carrier to make sure the size is nice. So unfortunately the groove height on all of the new ones is different from the original ones. The original one has 15.6 measured from the top surface, and all the others have 14.5. And if you put them next to each other, you can see the difference. It could be enough, so there could be enough overlap between the feed bore to feed also those with oil, but that's what I need to check. If you have a look on the camshaft carrier, for example, take one hydraulic lifter out, you will see that the opening for the oil is much bigger than the groove itself on the hydraulic lifter. On the M111 and the gasoline engines, for comparison, the bore in the cylinder head for the oil feed is only exactly the size of the groove. So here we have a little bit more room to play, let's say, and I will measure this. I will place the camshaft like I did already, and then measure on the top surface and then also to the oil feed opening, so I can say, is the groove on the other ones here also overlapping with the oil feed, and will it get oil? It should be easy to check, and I will do this now, and then we will see the results. I now measured the position of this oil feed groove here. It seems that it's no problem at all. The range is so wide that it will feed all of those with oil. And therefore we have some candidates which could be tested. This one, for me personally, I think this will be the best because of the adjustment range. This would be also okay, and also this one. I disregarded the others for different reasons. So those have a surface finish of some sort, and I would stay with the surface finish as close to the original as possible. So the original ones aren't surface coated, and therefore I would like to choose one which also doesn't have any coating. This, for example, has only coated the top part. That's also why this is disregarded. Now, so these three are also blank, have a good adjustment range, and Also, it felt nice when pushing them together. This one, for example, was labeled as a heavy-duty hydraulic lifter, and this was very tough to compress. So I think if you put this in the engine, the valves will stay all the way open, and it will take a long time until the valves get closed again. Maybe the spring pressure isn't enough to do that in a certain amount of time. So that's why we have these three, and I will end this video at this point. We will have a follow-up video when I order the rest of them, of the one I chose, and then assemble them to the car and test start and everything else. And you will see the result, and we will find out together, is the problem solved from there on or not. And if yes, you also have a nice solution now if you have the same trouble, and I will provide you with the right hydraulic lifters so you can also benefit from this. Thank you for watching, like, subscribe, and see you in the next video.